Cool. Well, so this is basically a call for you. So a lot of you guys are here all in several calls, and some of you, it might be your first call. But the goal is just to answer any questions you've got about the deals you're doing, the programs, how can we make things better, any of that kind of stuff. So thank you, Marcus, and welcome everybody. Let's get any questions going that you've got that you would like to chat about.
All right, if you have questions, guys, post your question in the chat box and we'll get those answered for you.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to just talk for a second. So I just hopped off a call, and I have another call immediately after this one about a deal that we did 2 years ago that is continuing to evolve. And just to kind of let you know that it's really interesting that as you close your deals and you get into the, what are we doing to grow and what's our plan to exit, there will be all kinds of opportunities that come about. And in this particular deal, it's really cool because the things that happened with COVID changed the way the deal was able to be realized on the buyer's end. So we were the seller on that deal, and we sold, and they have now come back and basically, because we're able with other assets that we've got, I didn't really talk about structure a whole lot. So let me talk about structure for just a second and pull out the trusty old iPad and show you why this is important and how it fits in to what we have been talking about. So let me do this and hit a new note. There we go. And then share. Deanna, you gotta let me share. Gotta let me share now. Come on.
It's Bailey this time.
I have
Bailey.
the power.
Bailey did it.
Bailey's a share miser.
I am. All right, you're good to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're structuring deals and you're thinking about how to exit, what I have found to be really helpful is that you have your core business. That's also known as your platform. And so this is the one that is going to be used to grow other, to acquire other companies and things like that. But if you can, particularly, and I'm going to try to do this in a way that kind of mirrors the graph, the wheel that I give you for acquisitions. So here, if you can continue to control media, but you sell the core business, and ultimately you have an agreement where you're sending leads in exchange for money, but you continue to own the media company, this can be a great thing. And as you track around the document that I gave you, the team and resources document, what we do here is we keep, let me put a different color to this. So we keep the media companies. We don't typically sell those. And then we also keep a large part of, I'm going to say keep most of, the team and resources in a shared resources company. So what does that mean exactly? That means that this company has staff, non-critical. If it's critical to the operations of the other of the core business, then that usually those people move over to the core business. But we run everything out of one company that has our team in it. And so basically then we enter into, when we do a sale, we enter into a services agreement to provide services to the thing that we sold in exchange for money. And we also, and you'll see, this is paralleling the way that we find businesses to buy. So services, we will also provide some services or products to the core business as well. And that's typically done on an affiliate basis for products and services that we have for sale that we didn't sell. So what's cool about that is that we're getting money back in lots of places. Also, the intellectual property sits in a separate company, and that's typically done through a license in exchange for money. And then you've got supply and distribution chain companies down here, which might supply or sell, again, receiving money. And what am I missing? Is that all of them? Yeah, it's just those 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So here's what's cool about that is that now, because when we sell, oh, and let me get me back to my keeps. So this is done in a separate company for intellectual property. So our trademarks and copyrights and everything, typically as we're operating, are held by a separate company. We license those to the core business that's doing the selling. That business pays back a license fee. So when we sell the company, we don't sell the IP unless they ask for it. And I don't know if I've told all of you guys the story of how I first kind of came on to the benefit, a side benefit of this, which was that we had a motorcycle helmet manufacturing company. All the brands, because motorcycle parts companies are very liability intensive. If somebody has a motorcycle accident, gets hurt, they sue everybody, including the helmet manufacturer. So we were manufacturing helmets, and our IP, the brands of this, were held in a separate company offshore and licensed to the operating company, just as you see here down on the lower left. And what would happen would be somebody would have an accident, and they would, the lawyers would come looking, and they would say, you know, you made the helmet, so we're going to sue you. Whether you have liability or not doesn't matter. They're just looking for insurance settlements. We didn't have high product liability insurance there, so it wasn't particularly wonderful for them to come after that company. But it was even less so because when they got on the phone with our attorney said, well, here's the deal. That's done under a license agreement. So if you get a big judgment against this operating business that's the core business, the IP will be safe. But this company that was manufacturing before, if it doesn't make this payment to the IP company, then the license agreement will terminate, and they'll just license it to another manufacturing company. So do you really want to sue us? Right? And that would settle most of those lawsuits without having to actually come out of pocket to these, you know, scumbag attorneys. Excuse the, I can say that because I'm a recovering attorney. So that's a really good reason to do that. Now, media is really important too, because media, as I mentioned here, is leads, right? So if you control a lead flow to the core business, that's a wonderful thing. And you might say, well, why would somebody buy it without the media? Because if you've got the business structured like this from the start, that means they need to buy the core business and the media company, and they're going to have to pay more for it. Maybe they don't want to. In the case in point, the one that I had the meeting on just a minute ago, and when we get off this call, they did not acquire the media company. And so all of the ability of that company to provide leads and other, I should put other here. So I'm going to put, I'm going to put other services that are non-core. And same here, other non-core products. So if you're keeping those things and you're only selling the things off that the buyer wants, then you still have a lot of benefit that you can bring to the company. Now, they're buying the core business. You're not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. They see the whole structure, and then they decide whether they want to acquire just the core, as the buyer did in this case, or they want to acquire everything. Well, in this case, our media company was a completely separate company. It was, a multi 8-figure company. So they didn't want to pay for that too. They did talk about it, and they did an analysis and hired a really expensive firm that went through and said, it would be nice if you wanted to buy that too, but we don't think it's essential. So they actually had the conversation about it. So you're very transparent about this. But now, so what happened is COVID happens. And the deliverability of the product of the core business became a challenge. And because of that, they were basically going to lose 2020 and most of 2021 revenue from this business that we sold. But we were able, because we had media, we were able to come in and say, let us focus all of the traffic that we can deliver to a joint venture that we do together. And so we created a joint venture that will enable us to very, very quickly in Q4, right, which we're in now, right? October, November, December. Yeah, we're in now. Enable us to make another multi-millions of dollars in profits from the deal, helping our buyer and making us a lot of money and increasing the value of all these companies around. So the beauty of the document that I gave you guys way back in the challenge, where it was identify companies around core, media, team resources, services, products, supply, distribution chain, and IP, it comes back again and again and again. And it goes to structure also, because if you structure this so that you basically consolidate your team and resources that are non-core into a separate entity, you can end up contracting, as we did when you sell, with that company. So we've got money that continues to come here, 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 and here, because we still provide non-core products and services that the core business sells on an affiliate basis. We don't really do any supply and distribution, but they also continue to benefit from our IP that we kept. So there's 5 things in here that continue to give value in the deal post-merger. So that might stimulate some questions too, but how you set this up, if you can, look at where in the business, where is our leads coming from? Is that a separate company that can exist, even if it doesn't exist when you acquire it? Does it make sense to have your customer acquisition be in a separate entity? Does it make sense to have a shared services company that has all of the employees that are providing non-core services to the business that you're building or the platform? And then if there are services and products that either you go out and acquire, for sure, keep those in a separate company and let there be cross-selling agreements, but keep them in separate companies because they have value. And you can always sell it all, but it's harder to break it up. If it's too expensive to do this, don't do it, because you can always break it up. But it's easier to have no change in a deal when you have momentum going forward to sell a company than it is to have to make changes. So that's just something to think about. And then keeping your IP in a separate company can be an amazing thing for liability. But the story that I didn't finish telling you is we put in the motorcycle business all of our IP there. And when we sold the motorcycle helmet business to a big company, they did not buy the IP. They had the licenses, so they still had the ability to use the logos on all their stuff, but they didn't own it. So when they went to sell, and this was a private equity, this was actually a hedge fund, right? When they went to sell to an even bigger company, because they had done, a bundle and sell deal, the bigger company said, well, we want you don't own that. You've got it licensed, but we want to own the whole thing. So they came back and said, well, hey, I know we've got the exclusive license and we're paying the royalties and all that kind of stuff, but we need to own that too. And we said, cool, you're welcome to buy it. And we ended up selling the IP company for more than we got for the core business that we sold a few years earlier. So that's happened a couple of times now. So that was like a big light bulb for me, is that you can actually get another sale through selling the IP company if the acquiring company doesn't say they want that bundled in. And it also gives you the ability to say, oh, well, if you want to buy the IP as opposed to license it, then, you know, that's going to be an additional fee. So using that document that I gave you to give you ideas of categories of businesses to buy, and then to brainstorm the ones that you would actually buy, can be used also for thinking about structuring. Something that might stimulate some thought for you guys. Is that helpful, that kind of stuff? It's kind of cool because that was that is a deal that we're in the middle of right now that surprisingly will generate a whole lot of profits as a result just of how we had it structured. And I will say that deal took maybe an extra 4 to 5 months to negotiate because we had all these separate entities and we had to negotiate service agreements, but it was so worth it. So worth it. Okay, Dee and Bailey, you guys got any questions for me?
Yep. So ITAC, if you could actually post your question in there, that'd be great. And I'll read it out here in just a second. John Sebastian says, does the seller normally ask for a confidentiality agreement prior to the LOI when asking for the financial statement in order to make the deal?
Yes, they do. And you should not have a problem signing the standard NDA for that.
Okay. Here's another one. I am in the process of negotiating a deal and would like to get a copy of the deal software. Oh, ITAC, you've got that. We'll get that to you this week because you're brand new. That comes into your portal this week. So don't worry about that. We've got that for you. Corey says, I accidentally fell into a deal. Now I'm wondering how I get them to agree to the deferred down payment. Do I just start that, or is that something I need to get the deal done?
Do I just state?
Oh, do I just state? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So absolutely, Corey. So when you're shaping your offer, you just figure out how much of that do you need to be deferred. And, they don't always agree to it, which is why we have a whole bunch of strategies. But definitely when you're proposing it, you would say something along the lines of, okay, so here's basically what I'm thinking about is it's, in the simplest deal would be that we're going to do, you're going to carry 80%. And here's the terms of the note. It's going to be, 5 years, 7 years, no interest, I pay it all at the end, and then there's several fallback positions from that. And then the other 20% we'll do as a deferred down payment. So what we'll do is we'll pay that within the first X days of closing. And then that's part of the negotiation. And do they always agree to it? No. But do they frequently agree to it? Yeah.
John says, does the seller normally ask for a guarantee if they are doing seller financing in case the company would go bankrupt?
Yeah, so they might ask, but again, because we're dealing with motivated sellers when we buy, the answer is no. We won't do a personal guarantee. And I think I don't remember if you guys all heard the call, but I talked about there's a lot of ways to not give a personal guarantee, and I have a long list of them. But which, Deanna, did you ever find that? Did I ask you to find the article on that by any chance?
No, but I will happily look for it.
Okay, you can do that. But if I just very quickly, in terms of negotiating personal guarantees, a few things that you can do is you can say, hey, look, I won't give you a personal guarantee, but I will give you let's do it this way, a higher interest rate. Because personal guarantees are all about risk. So keep in mind, as you are going through this, your whole goal for the seller is to lower their risk of non-payment, right? So what can you do to do that? You say, well, one of the things I can do is, because you're going to accept greater risk and I'm not going to give you a personal guarantee, I'm willing to give you a higher interest rate. Instead of 3%, I'll give you 6% or 10%, right? Another thing that you can do is you can add collateral. Oops, if I can spell. You can add collateral. So that would be basically, look, what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to secure the note with the assets of the company. So if the company has any assets at all, and you're doing, let's say you're doing 80-20 financing or 50-50 financing, then the seller basically, like, for example, in a deal that had, let's say it was $1 million purchase and the seller's going to carry 50%. So you got a $500,000 loan. And let's say that the business has, I don't know what, let's say 600K in assets. Well, then you basically, the seller is fully secured with the loan, right? There's enough in selling the assets that if the seller had to take back the business and sell the assets, the seller could be whole. But let's say alternatively that, that there were only 400,000 of assets. Well, you could add an additional 100 through some other collateral. So that could be a certificate of deposit. You could cross collateralize with, which is another way to do this. You can cross collateralize with other companies or other assets so that you don't have to give a personal guarantee, but your company might have multiple companies or other assets that it controls that you could get that you could basically add in to give them additional security. You could also put a cap on it. You could say, okay, I'm willing to give you a personal guarantee, but there's 500,000, there's 400,000 of assets. I only owe you 500, so I'll give you a personal guarantee for the difference of 100K. So now you've limited your exposure. The other thing that you could do is you could get a third party. So there are third parties that will basically do a signature guarantee. And so they'll charge you a fee for that, 4 to 10% of the amount, depending on, how much the loan is. And so that's something that other people will do. And I know that when I was a kid, my father used to guarantee real estate deals. And so basically he would give his third party guarantee to cover really good real estate deals, which would enable him to make money, just basically signing his name and saying, yeah, I've got it covered. But he looked at the risks, to be sure that was covered there. So there's a lot of ways that you can do this. The other thing that you can do is there is insurance. So there are insurers that will do personal guarantee insurance so that basically you can say, if I'm personally guaranteed, it's $1 million loan and it's an 80-20 deal, or it's a 50-50 deal in this case, right? 50-50 deal. And you sign on for 100% of that personal guarantee, you can have an insurance company that you pay a premium to. It's not cheap, but it's less than the liability of the personal guarantee. Or you can have a third party, cover that fee. There's a lot of ways to mix and match all of these things. That's just a few. I think there were like 15 ways to do this in the article that I wrote on it. But just off the top of my head, there's a lot of ways to do this. But think about all of these things are basically doing this. Right? They're lowering the risk. So anything that you can think of that would lower the risk of the seller, that's the best way to figure out a way out of it.
All right. And let's see here. Matthew says, best structures to benefit an owner selling. I have a business owner who I am under agreement with, and he wants to have the least amount of tax consequences possible.
Yeah. So for that person who's selling, the only downside to that is that means that it's going to be the most tax consequences for you when you sell. So if you're going to do that, probably stock or depending on what the type of entity ownership of that is going to be best for that person, because they'll get a capital gains rate on the sale of the stock. With no consulting agreements, no income, it's all basically put against the stock. Then they're going to pay in the United States about 21% most likely on the sale of those assets. And they would be wise to talk to an attorney about structuring beforehand, because they might be able to also move the ownership of the company from a person, maybe they own it personally in a state like California where the taxes go up to almost 15%, and instead own it through an entity in a tax-free state like Texas or Nevada or Alaska, and avoid those state taxes too. There are also things they can do like charitable trusts and and things like that. But those get kind of complicated. But like the most simple, easy thing would be if they sell their stock. If they basically own stock, own equity in the company, LLC membership interest, stock, whatever, and they sell that so that they get capital gains treatment. But the downside for you as the acquirer is that then you're going to have your basis in the stock. You can't depreciate stock. You can depreciate assets. We like purchasing assets because we can depreciate them over the scheduled periods that the taxing authorities allow us to do that, which means that that can offset future profits of the entity, that if you buy stock, you won't be able to do that. And also, if you buy stock, you get all the liabilities that come with the business as opposed to the asset sale, which typically cuts those out because you're acquiring the assets, cuts the liability off, and the new entity doesn't have that.
All right. And Jake said he really loved the idea of butterfly leverage. How did you make that 1.2 million from the affiliate launch?
The affiliate launch. Yeah, that was basically, I think I broke that down in the deal, but there was it was basically always look at all of the different. It comes from a concept called ordered thinking, right? So it's in chess, you don't play the first move, you play 5 moves ahead. That would be fifth order thinking. So if you try to apply fifth order thinking and then just say, okay, with all the assets and opportunities that I've got here, all the resources that I have available to me right now from this deal, what else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? So a great example would be in the Traffic and Conversion Summit last year. That's the wrong thing to share there. Let's do this. There we go. In Traffic and Conversion Summit last year, we had Richard Branson. And so, oops, I'm going to use the blue because it's easier to see. So we knew that that would be a good thing. And so he costs a few $100,000 to have. I'm not allowed to say exactly how much, but and it's done through a donation to his charity, Virgin Unite. So we had to agree to make that donation. Then we think about, okay, how do we monetize this? How do we recover that and maybe even make some profits off of it? And I'm doing this off the top of my head, so these are approximations of how this worked out. But basically, we had about, I think it was about 1.2 million in additional ticket sales to our event, directly attributable to we made this announcement. So this was the first thing, and that's why we wanted him, because we wanted more people to come. Now, so we could stop there and say, yay, that's a big win, because that's more than we had to pay him, right? But in multiple order thinking, we're going to think, okay, so now we've sold those tickets. How else can we do this, right? And I think that's the big lesson with multiple order thinking, is that most people stop at the first thing, particularly if it's a win, and this was a big win. But we said, okay, what else can we do? And we said, well, one of the things that we can do is our speakers send out a little card. We prepare it for them, and it looks basically like this. It has a big picture of them, and then down here on the bottom it has pictures of the different speakers, right? So we prepare this for these guys who are speaking at the event, and the people that are listed down in the bottom are the biggest speakers that we've got. So I think at the time, I don't remember, we had like Dean Graciosi, and who's the really good looking guy, Deanna, that Indian guy that Jay Shetty. We had Jay Shetty and Brendan Burchard. And so what happens, and a couple of others. So what happens is, and then there's text there that says come, and then click here to buy. So what happens is that the speakers, you give this to all the speakers and you put their picture in the big picture, and then they get to associate themselves with all these other speakers. So they mail to their list saying, hey, I'm speaking at TNC, sharing the stage with Dean Graciosi and Jay Shetty and Brendan Burchard, so be sure to come. And then you sell a whole bunch of tickets. Now, otherwise, they don't really have any motivation to mail their people. I mean, they get a small affiliate fee, but the real thing is the status. So the question was, okay, could we get these people to re-mail? So basically, the question was, would you like to swap this picture out with Branson and then say, I'm speaking, sharing the stage with Richard Branson? And the answer was yes. So we tested that and basically got a re-mail by all the speakers. So they all re-mailed, which generated an additional, I think it was like 500K of ticket sales that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So then we say, okay, well, that's cool. What else can we do? We said, well, one of the things that people like is they like to get up close and personal with the person. So can we do a VIP session? So we did, keeps going out there. We did a VIP session with Branson, which we offered for $15,000, and we sold about $400,000 worth of those tickets, right? And we said, what else can we do? And we just went through and added as many things as we could. So the next thing was, well, I'm not going to pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars to be on my podcast, but what if I interview him on stage instead of having him speak? And I do that as part of the podcast that I do live. And I say, basically, this is, my podcast name is Business Lunch. You guys should all subscribe. But my podcast is Business Lunch. So I say, okay, how can I get him to be an interview guest without me having to pay him? Well, then I just turn the session that has already been paid for by somebody else, by the event, into an interview that's live Business Lunch. So that's what I did. So I did Business Lunch live. And so if you look at pictures from Traffic and Conversion Summit, you'll see Business Lunch up there with Richard Branson, with me interviewing Richard Branson on the stage. And I got thousands of downloads and new subscribers, which turns into eventually, because you're advertising to people on the podcast too, it turns into, and we just got a $60,000 advertising contract on that podcast, right? So it turns into additional leads, additional money, additional opportunity to sell people. Then I said, well, what else can we do with that? So then we go and have a conversation with Apple and talk about an exclusive for Apple with the Richard Branson episode, which they are interested in, for iTunes, in exchange for a homepage feature on iTunes, which they said yes to, and on and on and on. So basically it's like, we're just going as many, that's fifth order thinking, right? And then I don't stop until I can't think of anything else. So the concept is the butterfly effect is right. A butterfly flicks its wings in, Argentina and causes a tsunami in Indonesia. And we don't know, because we don't frequently think about what is the possible ripple effect of anything that we do in business. But if you do actually consciously take the time to say, this one thing that I've got now, if I'm going to think about everything I can do to turn this into something more, what could that be? What could that be? Even on the deal that I was just talking to you guys about that I was drawing out a minute ago, it's the same thing. So we've added about 6 different monetization strategies to the thing that we were starting with. And the thing that we were starting with was really good. But then we add all these extra things to it and say, what else can we do? What else can we do? What else can we do? How do I merge as many of the opportunities that exist in the cloud of opportunities around the reality that I'm actually reducing to make happen, how do I take as many of those things and pluck them from the cloud and put them into the actual reality? That's that concept. Sorry for the really long description of that, but I think it's important. I mean, honestly, it's responsible for most of the true wealth that we create is because we're thinking deeper.
Thanks, Roland.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, and John Sebastian says 3.7 multiple average. Is this as EBITDA or revenue? Not sure how to use the charts correctly on this.
Yeah, that's okay. That's a multiple of EBITDA. So that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, also generally known as profit.
All right, and Andy says, how does it work when buying the company that has not been paying rent and other accounts payable during COVID? Are we responsible for the outstanding A&P? Is it possible to do an asset purchase where we don't have to take on those liabilities, or do we have to wait for the business to fail to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would defer that, Andy, to Grant Teeple, but the question that Andy's asking is a good one, and that's if there's a company that has deferred liabilities and accounts payable, that's what that A/P stands for, which is short-term trade debt that it has, like rent. Are you responsible for it? Well, there's a doctrine called successor liability that says that if you get a deal that's basically unfair to the creditors, like if you've got a bunch of assets and you sell those assets while you also have a bunch of debts, then in some states and countries, depending on the law, you may find that the assets carry with them the liabilities that existed in the business. Typically, that's only the case if it is a fraudulent transfer, which means that if there is a transfer of assets that puts the business in a position of insolvency, and insolvency is typically defined as the business cannot pay its bills as they become due, then you usually will have some sort of challenge with that. But if the business is otherwise okay, and it's transferring some of its assets to you and the business can still pay its debts as it comes due, then that's generally something that that is allowed. Check your lawyer and your local statutes to be sure. I'm not giving legal, accounting, financial, or weight loss advice. And the thing to think about, though, is that you really want to do a good deal for everybody. So you want to think about, remember that in a normal acquisition, the business owner is required to give you a debt-free company. And so one of the things that we use as a way to purchase companies is that we will take on the debt that our SPV is anyway. Our SPV will take on the debt of the company that we're buying. So if you're buying those assets and it's got deferred rent, then you would generally either say, seller, you're responsible for taking care of that, and that's in the agreement, and the seller takes care of that from the proceeds of the sale, or you say, my SPV is going to take care of that, but you're going to give me a reduction in the purchase price equal to the amount of the debt that I'm going to take over for you. So you really don't want to try to screw the creditors out of the deal. Now, you could negotiate an abatement or a reduction or an additional deferral of any of those debts yourself as part of the deal. And I've done quite a bit of that. And so you basically go to each of the creditors and you say, hey, landlord, listen, this business, it hasn't paid you rent because it's not making money. I believe that I can acquire the assets of this and turn it into something, but I can't stay here or I can't pay all of that back rent. So you have a decision to make. Do you want somebody to come in that's going to continue to be a great tenant, or and you forgive that rent, or you reduce it by 70% or 90% or whatever, or you give me an abatement or forgiveness of that, and I want the next 6 months for free. Any of those things are possible. So that's just a negotiation, but it's a great question. You definitely want to get it worked out, though, so you can be sure that there is no accidental passing of the liabilities over to your entity.
All right, and Brian Weiss says, I have a friend with some interesting connections who's interested in raising capital for me. My understanding is that I'm not able to compensate them directly for that unless they're licensed for that sort of thing. Is there a legal way around this?
Yes. So in the program, there's an interview with Jillian Sidoti, who is the securities attorney that we use and a lot of folks that we know use for that kind of stuff. And we talk specifically about that. So I would recommend that you listen to that. And you could also reach out to Jillian. And Deanna, would you be kind enough to
I will, but
info?
But we are also doing a live call with her in a couple of weeks too. So I'm working on that
great.
schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Anthony says, can you discuss structuring a roll-up? Is there a certain structure when acquiring complementary companies to your core business? I'm trying to iron out an offer that includes participation in the exit of the holding company that their company is currently part of.
No, we haven't, but that would be a good subject for a call. It's definitely longer than just a few words here. So why don't we do a call, Deanna, with maybe with Grant and one of the private equity firms that we know, maybe one of the guys from Principal. Let's when we get off this call and I get off the call after this call, let's touch base and we'll set that up because I think that'd be a fun call. Roll-ups are super fun, and I think that's a great thing to cover.
Perfect. Andy says, we are looking at competitors plus complementary businesses in our market that have the same customer type as us, but offer different services. We want to create new entities like United Airlines and other United companies, or the companies together of multiple companies under one brand. Then we want to roll up. Okay, it just left
Got it.
me.
Then we want to roll our
Sorry.
existing 25-year-old company into that new brand along with new companies we buy. Are our employees employed by the new company or the existing company? And the answer is that's up to you. The way that we would typically do that is like when I showed you the structure a minute ago, there's a reason that, and I'll go back to drawing because it's easy to explain. Okay, so there's a reason that we have, in the structure that I showed you, basically, we have a company that's got staff and resources. So we do that, and then we basically, that's in a separate company, and then in your acquired companies, in your companies that you're rolling up, you might have, let's say, you could do it one of two ways. You could either have, oops, that's a little too close. You could either have your platform company, which is the company that you are rolling up other companies in, and your employees who are sitting in the staff and resources company can be leased or loaned to the platform company in exchange for money. Now, then you've got all of the staff in one place, but they're in a separate company and they're being loaned to your platform company, who then basically allocates them out to its roll-up number one company, roll-up number two, etc., right? And it's basically, the platform company is paying the bills and it's providing the employee services to those companies either for money or because that's part of what it offers. The other thing that you could do is the other thing that you could do, why that is erasing, there we go, is instead you could have the staff and resources company go and contract directly with the roll-up companies. And how you want to do this is going to depend on a lot of things that would be specific to your deal. But so then these are separate companies, and they would, in that case, each contract directly with the staffing company that's going to loan them employees, and in exchange is going to receive back money. Okay, so that's a couple ways that you can go about doing that. Now, the benefit of all of this, and you can achieve this benefit either way. So it's just a question of what your deal is with your roll-up companies. But the benefit of this is that you're aggregating all of your staff in one place. So you've got staff is in one company. So you only generally need, you need fewer, not less. You need fewer managers to control everyone, to manage everyone, right? and you only need one payroll company, and you only need one benefits company. So it's significantly less expensive when you have multiple companies to aggregate everyone into one company, and you only need one HR admin. So there's a lot of benefits to just having, when you got multiple companies, everybody in one company that then lends those people out. And how the payment for that is taken care of, whether it's taken care of by the platform companies or the individual companies, is again just something that you negotiate. If that's a benefit that you want your platform company to provide to the roll-ups as part of the deal, then that's great. But you might not have to do that, in which case save yourself the money, let the roll-ups pay for that as well. And we then do allocations across the company. So we know how many hours is somebody, like if there's a person that's working at roll-up 1, roll-up 2, and roll-up 4 that's in the staff company, and they cost $30,000 a month, and they're working equally in each of those companies, then they would be allocated $10,000 per month to each of those companies. And that each of those companies is paying $10K, goes up to the staffing company, which then pays the $30K to the employee. That's a very simple explanation of that, but that's generally how that works.
And Andy, that should have also answered A and B on that as well. So Afam says, do you need separate SPVs for each acquisition, or can you lump all acquisitions into one holding SPV?
Yeah, and I mentioned this in the training, is I think that the ideal thing is that you have an SPV for each controlled group around a portfolio topic. So basically, if you're doing real estate or SaaS or why can't I think of anything? Or a service business like accounting, then you would have one SPV that is the platform for all of the companies that you acquire that are accounting company related. So if you have an accounting company and you decide it's going to do management consulting and payroll and business services, then I would have each of those, and let's say you did that through acquisition. So you have your core accounting company, you buy 3 more accounting companies, they're all going to be accounting, so they're all going to get merged together most likely. But then you also decide to add payroll company, and that's a separate company you acquire, which you want to keep separate, and business consulting and other business services. Then all of those would still be under the one holding company that is accounting related. And if I then went and bought a real estate company, I would put that in a separate SPV. But as long as I'm buying in that one area or acquiring in that one area, it's generally most flexible to have your holding SPV be one company. And then from a liability standpoint, under that company, how you want to consolidate companies into one or more companies just depends on how much liability is there in the deal, and what are the terms of acquisition of the company that you're acquiring, because you probably don't want to make your SPV that owns 4 other completely paid for accounting companies liable for the debt that you issue to assume through seller financing the payroll company. I hope that makes sense. But if you have questions around that, feel free to ask.
Chris Harrison says, Roland, I've heard you talk about your dashboard that you use for each company that you buy in the 3 monthly pillars. Can you give more detail on this management concept and maybe an example of the software or tools that you use for your specific business? And I'm assuming he's referring to Trello.
Yes. Yes. So we have a Trello board that we use. It starts with, let me see if I can find it real quick and I will show you. Let's see. Okay, so where I start is with the leadership and Richard Lindner's sessions that he provides you guys, plus his intensive, which you have access to. That's the management intensive. Deanna, does everybody here have access to the management intensive?
It's the ones that are in 5.0 would already have it. 6.8, it'll be in your portal later on. It's in a drip.
Okay. Great. So let me mirror again. Okay. So this is an example of what we use. So this is a filled out version just so you can kind of see. And this was Q1 of this year, I believe. Yeah, Q1 of this year for one of our companies called the Scalable Company. And so we start, let me get rid of all of the drawing here. Let's see. Make it easier to see everything. There we go. Okay, so this is, and I'll use red just so you can see. So we start here at number 1 and say, what is our goal and theme for the quarter? And then we say, okay, in this case, it was we want to have this company become the scalable company. And so we want it to be the brand, the company, and the adjective. We want to own those things in the customer's mind. Then the second step that we do is we go down here and we say, what are the 3 pillars that will allow us to achieve the goal? So that's these 3 things here, right? And you can see it says pillar 1, pillar 2, and pillar 3. And so we identify that those things are launch the scalable brand is the first thing right here. And then we say integrate digital marketer and scalable, and then systematize and scale. Now we've got the pillars identified and we say, okay, how will we know if we're achieving those goals? How are we going to know if that's happening? So then we identify what are the success metrics that we should be tracking. Now I said different dashboards happen different ways. Different dashboards have different KPIs on them because they're different objectives that you want to achieve in any given quarter. So then we go up here and we say, this is number 3. We're going to identify what are the objectives. And in this case, we identified sales, total number of subscribers, total number of transactions, kind of a bizarre thing to track, but we know that that's a leading indicator of financial success, and monthly recurring revenue, MRR. And then we list our actual and target where we are now, where we want to be, and what's the gap we have to make up. Then we go down to here and we say, and this is all of the initiatives that we're going to put in place during the quarter to achieve each of these strategic pillars. And so you can see under the integrate DM and scalable, centralized organizational structure, comms update, emails, Slack, et cetera, internal launch, company mastermind for the company to be able to, within the companies in this company, share what's working, et cetera. So that canvas then goes to this meeting format, which let me get rid of all this stuff too so that I can show you. So this then is the next place that we go. So based on having identified those things, we say we're going to have a weekly meeting about those things. It's going to be approximately 1 hour long and follow this format. And you can see here, and this is all in those intensives that you guys have access to. So then we identify, and what's the organizational structure of the company? So we'll go through and say, okay, here's our organizational structure. So that's what we're going to use to determine whoever heads each of the major categories of the company: finance, marketing, customer service, whatever. Who are those people? What are their names and titles? And that's going to be the leadership team. Then that leadership team gets listed here, and we say, what are the 3 big things that you want to achieve during the next 7 days? And oops, I went over that. So I'll do it here. So that's what this section is what are the big 3 things that you want to achieve during the next 7 days? And each leader lists the 3 things in this session. Then the following week, they go over and look at that and say, okay, how did we do? So they'll look here in the beginning and that part of the meeting says, did I achieve these things? And then they're color coded. You can see if they completed it, it's green. If they're working on it, it's yellow. Orange is a dependency. They're counting on somebody else or some event. They might be stuck or it got reprioritized. And so then we're able to keep track of the people that have the most green are, staying on track. The people that have a lot of red, they need some support, right? And then we also have a section down here at the bottom that is called IDS, which you can see it's very small there down there at bottom, called Identify, Discuss, Solve. And so that's how we go through identifying what are we doing that's going to advance us towards the goals that we identified on our big 3 sheet, which is the first sheet I showed you, which then all of the, let me get rid of all this stuff. Then what happens is over here, this is the 3 pillars. And now we know we've taken that from that sheet that we did, and we say, okay, let's list everything that initiative-wise needs to happen to make that happen, during the quarter to make these pillars happen. So these are really the initiatives. And then we say, what are we going to green light out of those initiatives? And we have a meeting where we go and say, these are the things that are most important. So when they're green lit, then they move here. And then that means we're going to take these things on. Then as they start, this is where we track the progress. So we start here and we track the progress. And then when they're done, they get moved over here. So that's kind of how we keep track of things and determine what goes on each of our dashboards.
Okay, and Mario says, how does the media group get you leads?
It does whatever it does. So the media group is, media means that this is some place that the attention and eyeballs of our ICP, our ideal customer profile, have already been aggregated that we own, or it might be one that we want to acquire, right? So how it gets you leads is that it's producing content, it's generating customer acquisition activities, and that's creating additional aggregations of eyeballs, right? So it might be that it's a lead magnet, it's a newsletter, it's a publication. Remember all those 7 categories of media that we talked about? It could be a group, could be a Facebook group, could be a LinkedIn group, could be an event, could be an SEO'd page that's ranking for one of your key terms, could be an Instagram account, YouTube channel, a publication, a newsletter, any of those kinds of things. That's all media. So the way that it gets you leads is that it has your customers, and you then inject offers from the core product or service company into the media to move those people over from prospect to customer.
All right, and Russ Bankson says, when you sell, does the buyer require obligation to rely on unsold services as needed?
I'm not sure I understand that.
Russ, do you want to kind of try to ask it in a different way?
Where is it, Deanna, in the chat, just so
It's
I can
at
read?
1:15. It's at the 1:15 mark.
11:15?
No, 1:15. Yeah, 11:15 your time.
I'm kidding you because of that.
Yeah. I know.
When you sell, does the buyer require obligation to rely on unsold services as needed? Yeah, Russ, if you want to come on for a second, Deanna can unmute you, and I'm not exactly sure what that question is.
Russ, go ahead and unmute if you'd like. I don't see on here real quick. We can come back to that. Okay. All right, Jake says, do you know of any automated outreach systems for sourcing new deals, such as leveraging LinkedIn, VAs, advertising, etc.?
Yes, we have had mixed results from that. Typically, it needs to be human run because there's Phantom Buster and other software solutions that do that, but you can get your account banned because most of them violate the terms of services. The ones that don't are typically human run, and there's a couple of people that do that. And we've seen mixed results. Some people absolutely love it, and some people hate it. I haven't seen one. They're expensive, though. I haven't seen one for less than, I think, about $1,800 a month. So it is automating the outreach versus getting a VA and having a program where you do it yourself is usually more expensive and more risky than taking it on yourself.
And Linda has a great question. She says, when you were talking about the deal earlier, why would someone have bought this company without the lead generating machine?
Yeah, it's a good question, but it's interesting. So in that case, the company already had a customer and prospect list of about 70,000 people, and it had its own way of advertising. Like they have the ability to advertise, but they didn't have a completely separate company that was able to generate a whole lot of customers around the topic that this particular customer would be interested in. So they did buy a trademark, a customer list, and a business that was ongoing. But what they didn't buy was the completely separate company that has the lead. So if you think about in any business, you've got the core business that's operating and it can advertise its services, and it does. But also, thankfully, we can go out and buy a trade show, or we can buy a newsletter or something like that. So we already had done that acquisition, and it was held separately, and they knew about it, and they knew about the relationship, and they decided that they didn't want to spend the extra money to acquire that as well, because it would have added, a lot to the purchase price. As a matter of fact, that media company would have cost probably twice what the core asset that they bought was. They looked at it, they hired a company to determine if it was necessary, and the company said, no, it's good with the customer list that it's got and advertising. So that's the main reason, is because when you have a controlled group of companies, somebody might not want to buy everything you've got. It might not be in their core competency. The fund that bought, or the company that bought that asset from us, was not in the business of media. They were in the business that was the core business. And so they did not see the need to go there because we had an affiliate relationship. And so they can simply continue that affiliate relationship or go to other people, right? So it just depends on what the core desires of the company that's acquiring are.
Buzz is wanting to know if you're at liberty to tell him the company names.
I can't. I'm sorry.
All right. And Kevin Yoder says, have you been in a situation where servicing debt is keeping a company from making money, and without restructuring or raising money that the company will close its doors? However, without the debt service, the company could be making money. How flexible?
Many times I have done that. I actually really enjoy doing those deals because I like negotiating, and it's just kind of fun, even though it's a twisted kind of fun, I guess. How flexible have I seen debt holders? It's all about risk for all of them. So as long as everyone is professional and there's not some emotionality attached to it, then generally it's dumb of a debt holder not to agree to a restructuring when there's a good risk that they're not going to get paid, and you have the ability to threaten bankruptcy. So bankruptcy means it's very likely you're going to get $0. So you just have to paint the picture that is bleak enough with the existing ability of them to collect on what they're owed, given the overall company situation, and show them a path to receiving more than they would receive if they sued for the debt or foreclosed on an obligation. And when you do that, it's almost always that they'll agree to it, because they're just crazy not to. Even banks, right? Actually, the more institutional they are, the easier it often is, because there's less emotionality, because it's somebody that has a job and they don't really care, as opposed to somebody, it's like you owe, Joe and you have been friends for 20 years, and, Joe's going to have some hard financial times if you don't pay the $400,000 that you owe Joe for the materials that you've bought from him. That's a harder one, because Joe's got to basically swallow the relationship and admit that Joe overextended credit to you, and take a haircut that's going to be hard on Joe too. That's the harder one to negotiate, but the answer is most of the time they're willing to do that. And it's a great way to do a deal, because a lot of times the entrepreneur is so in the soup of it that they don't see that there's the ability to do this, right? They don't see that they can negotiate their way out. And so you come in and do that, and you just run your math and say, man, if we could get rid of these 6 things, or they could be lowered to this amount of total debt repayment, then this is a great company. And you go and see if you can make that happen. That's a fun challenge.
Maxim says, I have a potential deal and I'm struggling to decide whether to proceed or not. The company is having a hard time, although there are still 1 to 2 million in sales. The owner leaves and it will take some efforts to find another manager. Also, it's low margin business with only 5% net profit. The upside is that there is a huge potential as they work on 40% capacity and many processes can be improved. Another very interesting thing is that the sale price is $480K and it includes the real estate that is valued at $950K. Is there a good way to do the deal or would you not recommend?
I mean, if you can sell the real estate for $950K and the sales price is $480, that's very interesting. The biggest challenge for me would be the net profit on the business. So if it's doing 1 to 2 million in sales at a 5% net profit, that means it's making $50,000 to $100,000 in net profit. Doesn't give you much to work with. So I would also be very curious as to whether I could improve the profit margin. But I mean, would I do the deal if the real estate's valued at $950 and the sales price is $480? I'd do the deal and sell the real estate and put the $400 and some thousand after real estate commissions in my pocket and own the company and not care if it made money or not.
All right. And Hugh says, when you're buying a traffic asset, such as a Facebook group, do you avoid making as many changes as possible to spook the existing community, like the name or the group, or have you found that this does not matter?
It depends. So if we're merging into a related group, then it generally won't matter to them. We don't find a lot of fall off. But I would be careful about making a ton of changes because people are there for a reason. So you need to have a story to tell them.
Linda says, is it just a fluke that you found a buyer that would acquire your business without the IP? Isn't that typically a core asset in a deal that has IP?
It depends, because if the company has a license, so it would be atypical if they didn't have a license to the IP. That would be kind of silly because then they wouldn't be able to use it. But they had a perpetual worldwide inexpensive license. And so it was, to them, it was just like they owned it. They didn't care. And that was a very sophisticated buyer. And they just looked at it just like the company that I mentioned looked at the media. They're like, okay, do we have everything that we need? Yes. Is there a license agreement in place for that? Yeah, absolutely. Cool. We're good. The company in that structure as it is making money. And based on the money that it's making in that structure, we're happy to do it. Did they have the opportunity to come and say, we also would like to buy that IP? Yes. And had they done, would have said, we'd be happy to sell it to you for more money. And they might have said, well, then we're not going to do the deal. And then at that point, we could say, all right, you got us. You can have it too. Or we could say, you know what? If you're not willing to do that, we're not willing to do the deal.
Chris says, what if your IP can apply to multiple industries? When selling IP, do you specifically qualify the IP as it applies to the industry of the core business being sold? Or can you generate multiple patents in different industries with the same general IP idea?
Yeah, if you look at all rights as a bundle of sticks that you can carve off. You can take any of the sticks out. In IP, it's typically classes. So it would be a class or application that you would say, so this formula for the plastic related to the motorcycle helmet applies to the sale of motorcycle helmets and motorcycle related products. That would allow us, if it would also apply to rubber kitchen containers or something like that, to use the IP elsewhere. So yes, you do typically specify the bundle of rights that is being licensed.
So are all these related businesses in separate SUVs to be sold separately or to be together?
Yeah, we already answered that.
Okay. Hugh says, can you see anything wrong with merging two companies that offer different services? For example, commercial laundry and commercial cleaning under one manager due to the size of each not being large enough to warrant two managers?
Yeah, because then your manager is basically your portfolio manager. So yes, that's a very small version of what other firms do. Nothing wrong with that at all. You can always split them off.
With third party taking on personal guarantees, how do you figure out appropriate amount of equity to give for that? In the US, are there insurers for personal guarantees? I understand that this is available in the UK, but interested in the US.
Yeah, I haven't looked recently, Linda, in the United States for people that do that. But my understanding is that those folks in the UK will also insure US companies. So you'd have to chat with them about that. As far as the appropriate amount of equity, that's just a straight out negotiation. It's usually not done as equity. It's done as as an amount of money. But again, that's just a straight negotiation.
Joanne asked, Roland, do you make a separate company for every different piece of IP? Otherwise, one IP lawsuit could threaten the other IP, but multiple IP companies could get very complicated.
Yeah, we use one because we're not really concerned about IP lawsuits. We vet the IP and we're sure about the ownership when we put it in. So we're more concerned about products liability than anything else.
Jean Sebastian says, if you create a new corporation to buy assets and the company you want to acquire has the name of the company as INC and not trademarked, what do you do to keep the brand? Do you trademark the name when the company is not active anymore? My question is mostly about how to keep everything related to the brand when they don't have a proper IP.
Yeah, if they don't have proper IP, then that might be a condition to the acquisition. It would certainly impact the price, and I would certainly look about securing the IP before I made the acquisition to be sure that I could do whatever I wanted with the company.
Okay. Joanne says, if you do an asset purchase, you leave behind a shell company with existing debt. So do the assets that you bought bring with them the liabilities that, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I answered that a little bit ago.
Okay. Let's see here. Roll up call Maxim. Maxim says, you mentioned that a normal sale is debt-free. That means the multiples we talked about are debt-free companies. Is that correct?
The multiples assume that the company will be sold and all of the debt will be paid off. Yes, it's a multiple of profits. The profits have nothing to do with the debt except to the extent that the payments on the debt to keep the debt in place and service it are being deducted from the sales of the company in determining the net income. Two different things.
Here's a situation. How do you approach a situation like this where the company has 400K sales, 20 to 30% margin, has 200K in cash in the bank and no debts, and has IP in terms of software products, but no recurring revenue or any EBITDA? So how do you value it and how do you structure the deal?
Okay, so that means that if it's got a 20 to 30%, assuming you're saying that's the gross margin, then that means that the SG&A, the selling, general, and administrative expenses, are 20 to 30%. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong. The 200 cash in the bank is nice. How would I approach the situation? I mean, I'd just run through all the things that we go through, strategy by strategy, and see what you could do. You can do a carve out on the 200K in the bank. If it's got no profits, then the true net margin is zero. If it's got no EBITDA, right? If it's got no earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, then it doesn't have profit. So it's break even. And I'm not super excited about it unless there's something that I know that I can change that's going to create profit there. Otherwise, why are we buying it? So but let's assume that you can identify something and you've got a reason for going forward with it. Then you would look at all of the normal strategies that we go through to determine, can you apply any of those to acquire it? That's how I would approach it.
David says, if we acquire 70% of a company with a seller note for the full amount, does the seller note get paid from the total EBITDA cash flow or only from the 70% part that we own? Can we have full control of the cash flow?
Yeah, it would only be from the part that you own, but depending on what your agreements are with the other owners. So if you brought in integrator equity people and said that this is part of the deal, then it's all disclosure. So you can structure that any way that you want. But if it's like you're coming in and you're only acquiring 70% and the existing owners are hanging on to 30, then you would not generally be able to take 100% distribution. You'd have like if there's 100K that was coming out of the company, you would only get 70K of that, which would then service your debt on the acquisition.
And John says, when I look at the chart of multiples in 2019 for EBITDA, they are really higher than 3.7. Should I understand that it's because it's for all the industry, no matter the size of the company? Then how should I use the chart for SMB multiples for small deals?
It's just a guideline. So I gave you three services that are under BVR, business valuation resources, that have very, very specific. So you'd have to go down and take a look at that. But yeah, the average across all industries is 3.7. But keep in mind that there's all kinds of, that's reported transactions, right? So there's a whole lot of transactions that aren't going to be reported in those numbers that are the multiple numbers that you get that are not, that's not a paid service. That's just general guidelines.
And if you split the IP, the resource team, complementary service products, etc., in different companies, when acquiring a new company, do you transfer the assets in all different companies that you formed? For example, the IP of the new company is now in your new IP company.
I'm
If
sorry,
you
I'm reading
split the IP,
it.
sorry.
I'm reading it. If you split the IP, resources team, complementary services, etc., in different companies, when you acquire a new company, do you transfer the assets? Yes, exactly. Yes, you do. In other words, if you acquire a company that has team, IP, media, etc., and you're bringing it into a platform where you have separated those out, then yes, what you would do is basically then move those assets into those respective companies. Yes.
Okay, George, I just answered you on that. If you were new to the M&A space with no industry in mind to work off of, which arbitrage strategy would you focus on, and what would you aim to achieve as a desired result or goal to hit by the end of these 8 weeks to give yourself a real jumpstart into this space? This is from Jake Spear.
Hey, Jake. Yeah, to me, the easiest deals are earn-in deals. So if you've got a service that you can provide, that's the easiest, quickest deal to do. Otherwise, it's just straight, go through that process and look at that chart of all the different things that you can buy, category, company. I mean, just go through the process. The process is there are two main charts of where to find deals, right? Of how to find deals. First, you identify categories using the media, team resources, services, products, supply distribution chain, IP chart, as well as the $0 assets chart. ZDots, the $0 traffic assets are the easiest, quickest to acquire when you're acquiring something as opposed to acquiring a whole company. So you might look at doing that first. But just follow that process, man. I laid it out specifically because that's what I've found to work the best.
All right, Sly Buford says, I have a podcast and I'm looking to buy more. So what are your thoughts on buying and building a podcast network?
Absolutely love it. I think it's great. We're doing it. So yes, love it.
All right, and Rob says, I'm in talks to buy a dental office asking 2.1 million, 1.875 million cash flow. Owner willing to carry 40% and banker on deal. Informed me today that there's a buyer willing to put down the down payment of $430K and wants someone to come in for 75% of equity if I guarantee financing for the balance. I don't want to guarantee that, but do you have any ideas on how to structure this deal? There's 3 dentists in the practice. I'm not a dentist, and selling owner will replace himself before leaving. Also, any way to manage non-compete on 3 dentists?
I mean, it's somebody else's deal, so you're a little stuck with the strategy there, as far as what they've negotiated. But the 40 carryback is great. They're going to put down 430. So is that asking 2.1 million? They're going to put down 430. So that's what is that 20? About 20%, a little bit more than 20%. So I guess the numbers. 75% of equity. I'd have to know more about that deal, Rob. Let's talk about that next time. Let's make that the first thing that we talk about. I just need a little bit more information because those numbers don't exactly add up.
Juan Montoya says, you've taught me that we can acquire digital assets by leveraging sponsorships, which I like a lot. I'm currently working on a deal to acquire a Facebook group that has over 1 million members. The founder of the group owns a company that sells diet products through it. Do I acquire just the group or the company as well?
Say that one more time.
You have taught me to acquire through digital assets with sponsorships. I'm currently working on a deal to acquire a Facebook group that has over 1 million members. The founder of the group owns a company that sells diet products through that. Do I acquire just the group or the company as well?
That's your call. Either way is fine. Just depends on what your plan is.
All right. And let's see here.
It's so much fun as you guys get into the deals to see what's happening. It's really, really cool.
Can you talk about, Andy, it looks like this is the last one. Andy says, please talk about the strategy for integrating brands. How long do you transition the old name to the new name, answering the phones, name on invoices, and so forth?
Yeah, once you decide what you're going to do and you've developed your brand guidelines, that's just a plan that you put into place. So, you would forward, if you're changing websites and that kind of stuff, you would forward indefinitely. You would do redirects and that kind of stuff. But once you decide to move to the new brand and launch it, you're committed, you're all in. So any links that you've got or other things you would be forwarding to the new brand, you would let everybody know about it, and you'd have a rebrand plan that you would execute. But it's instantaneous once you decide to do it.
All right. I think we answered them. Oh, actually, I have one more. Sorry. Bizrat, I'm a complete beginner in business, and all the information I'm getting is like drinking from a fire hose. How should I approach this in order to acquire a business that will just improve my income first?
Yeah, just again, follow the process, Bizrat. The key is go through the materials and follow the process. The process is laid out to help you do that.
And then Michael says, what do you think about white labeling for our first company?
So white labeling is usually more of a add-on, but if it's a white label company that you're talking about, then that's cool. But otherwise, you're not really owning the underlying assets. So it's fine to start a new business, which is exactly what you said. So yeah, as a startup, I think it makes it go really fast. And Deanna, I think I see more questions popping up, but I'm gonna have to hop off.
Nope, you're fine. All right, guys, we'll answer more later. So we appreciate everyone's patience. We did a lot of questions today, so thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.